Nahal Patel is a Rutgers student, and he says he believes New Jersey is split up between the North, South, and Jersey Shore. He says plans to put Central Jersey on the map is off base.
The state assembly must be tripping, I'm not gonna lie.
Vernon Chapman, who moved to New Jersey in 1981, also opposes the bill. He says he gets why the state has been long divided into a North and South.
New Jersey is two states. The South is a lot more rural, a lot more farming and stuff down there. That's where all these great tomatoes come from. Further north, it's much more industrialized.
For Zumra Amjad, the divisions are a lot more personal. She says having Central Jersey on the map would make traveling there seem less far away.
I have friends from North Jersey, and when I say let's meet up, they don't want to travel all the way down to New Brunswick.
The city's just an hour train ride from Manhattan. Michael Jaka, who I found on a hot summer day, says bringing the three regions together is a positive step. So in a way, no matter where you're from, North, Central, or South, everybody's unified in how they treat each other.
Everybody unified because they tend to like wherever they're from and represent wherever they're from.
Even if Governor Murphy signs the bill validating Central Jersey as a real place, it's unlikely to sway the opinion of New Jerseyans, whose regional allegiances are central to their identity as pork roll. Or is it Taylor ham? Remzi Khalife, WNYC News.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Steve Inskeep.
And I'm A. Martinez. The most prestigious tennis tournament in the world comes to a close this weekend in London. Serbian superstar Novak Djokovic is playing in the Wimbledon's men's semifinals this morning. He's looking to add to his record 23 Grand Slam wins. And on the women's side, a Muslim player has a chance at making history. Here to tell us more about what we can expect to see this weekend is John Wertheim. He's there covering Wimbledon for Sports Illustrated and the Tennis Channel. So, John, 3 of the top men's players are in the semifinals today. Who's had the hardest run so far?
Who's had the hardest run? At some level, Novak Djokovic, just because he is playing with this immense pressure that every time he plays, it's like the Super Bowl for the player on the other side of the net. But I think in terms of set scores and match scores, probably Daniil Medvedev, the Russian, who was very close to losing to this American player, sort of in the story of the tournament, Chris Eubanks 2 days ago, and Medvedev was able to prevail, but it was very close.
All right, so Djokovic's opponent is an 8th seed, Jannik Sinner. Djokovic is a living legend, still on top of his game. I know you said the pressure's on him in a way, but what are Sinner's chances against him?
We're grass versus lawnmower. Djokovic has just been at this completely different plane. I was just looking up the stats. This is his 71st major he's entered in his career. He's trying to make his 35th final. He's the overwhelming favorite. He hasn't lost on center court in more than a decade. He doesn't lose to top 10 players. This is sports, and these are not pre-scripted results like pro wrestling, but short of that, it's very hard to see him not prevailing.
All right, in the women's final, Tunisian star Ons Jabeur takes on the Czech Republic's Marketa Vondrousova. Jabeur's been in the finals before. She's never won. What are her chances this time around?
This time, I think high for exactly the reason you said. She was a finalist here last year, and by her own admission, she's a wonderful player, and she's also just this wonderfully candid, self-possessed presence here, and she's been very upfront about it, that she sort of didn't show up, and the nerves got to her, and she knows the history at stake, the first woman from the Arab world possibly to win a major, the first woman from North Africa. This is her 3rd major final, and I suspect this time she will be much more poised. I think she wins it, and I think it's a really big story for tennis.
So given her achievements, then, is the tennis world expecting more Arab and Muslim players entering the sport?
It's interesting you say that, because the chatter behind closed doors is not about matches. It's about Saudi Arabia's what looks to be inevitable foray into tennis, much as the case with professional golf. Nobody quite knows the form it's going to take, but Saudi Arabia has expressed interest in involving itself in tennis. With that comes money, and with money, ideally come players. So yes, one suspects that Ons Jabeur will have company fairly soon in terms of Arab country representation in tennis.
What is the talk centered on? What's it focused on?
I think it's the form this is going to take. Everybody is, the catnip of big oil money is sort of wafting around, and everybody's interested in this infusion of capital. The question is this going to be sponsorship essentially, or is this going to be something like golf, where there's this rival tour attempt that really sets the sport into turmoil. And tennis is sort of balkanized enough as it is, and throw in the lure of money. And I think everybody is sort of eager but nervous what form this is all going to take.
John Wertheim is with Sports Illustrated and the Tennis Channel. John, thanks a lot.
Anytime.
This is Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm E. Martinez.
And I'm Steve Inskeep.
Marketplace Morning Report is coming up next, and then in 10 minutes at 9 o'clock, it's the BBC NewsHour on WNYC. Let's check in with London to see what they're working on. London, good morning.
Good morning, WNYC. I'm Tim Franks. On the programme, evidence of atrocities in the Sudanese region of Darfur. And is the new health advice on sweeteners useful? That's BBC NewsHour, coming up at 9 on WNYC.
A flood advisory for New York City until 10:15 this morning. Expecting up to an inch of rain possible. Right now, it's 76. We have a mix of sun and clouds out there. A flood watch till midnight for parts of southern Connecticut and southeast New York.
Support for WNYC comes from Hudson River Park, presenting its 23rd Annual Blues Barbecue Festival, Saturday, August 19th, beginning at 1 p.m. at Hudson River Park's Pier 76. Open to all. More at hudsonriverpark.org.
When a loved one calls in trouble, but it's really an artificial intelligence clone.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Indeed, a streamlined hiring solution. Indeed helps businesses attract, interview, and hire candidates. Learn more at Indeed.com/hire. And by C3 AI. C3 Generative AI provides ChatGPT enterprise search that is verifiable, secure, and accurate across all enterprise data. C3.ai. This is Enterprise AI.
I'm David Brancaccio. First, the Environmental Protection Agency announced today how it's going to give out $27 billion worth of grants to help low-income communities go more green in an effort to curb climate change. It's a grants competition funded by the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act. Marketplace's Nancy Marshall-Genzer has more.
The EPA is setting up a green bank to dole out the money. It's not an actual bank, more of an investment fund. It works with the private sector, backing loans and making grants to nonprofits that work with banks to invest in projects that cut energy costs for consumers and lower emissions. Things like charging stations for electric vehicles, community cooling centers, and heat pumps for homes. The Biden administration says at least 40% of the money will be targeted to low-income communities, including rural areas and tribal communities, which often find it difficult to access this type of funding. Some states have had green banks for years. They make loans that are paid back with interest, investing in things like community solar arrays. New York, Minnesota, and even cities like Washington, D.C. have green banks. I'm Nancy Marshall-Genzer for Marketplace.
With quarterly results from big financial companies starting to come in this morning, we see that profits at the biggest U.S. bank, J.P. Morgan Chase, up 67% in the spring. As it moved interest rates higher, it earned more from borrowers. The stock is up about 3% pre-market.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Grammarly. Grammarly Business empowers companies to drive faster results with secure enterprise-grade generative artificial intelligence that works where teams do. It helps businesses break down information silos, collaborate efficiently, and quickly adapt to stay competitive. Grammarly.com/business. And by BuySide from the Wall Street Journal, an independent commerce site designed to help consumers make smart decisions with their time and money. WSJ.com/BuySide.
New techniques in artificial intelligence can copy likenesses, one of the issues in the actors' strike that began last night. It can also be used to manipulate a person's voice into saying anything. What you're about to hear is not me, but a software-generated clone of me. Hit it. From American Public Media, this is the Marketplace Morning Report. I'm David Brancaccio. Pretty close, although story of my life, it can't quite do my last name. Now, don't tell my boss this technology is available, and certainly don't tell any more scammers who can use AI-generated voices to trick people into parting with their money. I'm joined now by Wasim Khalid, CEO and co-founder of Blackbird AI, a firm that uses good artificial intelligence to stop the bad. Mr. Khalid, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I have reported on efforts to scam people. Often the phone rings, it's a voice on the phone purporting to be a nephew stuck in jail somewhere. You got to send money now. Artificial intelligence can actually make that kind of fraud worse?
I think infinitely worse. We've seen, 2.6 billion in impersonation scams reported by the FTC in 2022 without generative AI. One example of what generative AI could do to empower these threat actors, they could go on social media, get a couple of seconds of someone's voice or really any other audio source and be able to generate entire scripts of whatever they want that person to say. And so, we've seen recently children calling their parents asking for a wire transfer for a ransom, things of that nature. And this has become infinitely easier to do at very low cost, very quickly, with no technical experience needed.
So people listening should be aware, and also we've done reporting that when one of these situations happens, you get anxious. The person who picks up the phone gets worried, and when you're anxious, you may not think clearly. Other than being alert for the possibility of fraud, is there anything anyone can do?
Well, what I tell anyone today is to have some sort of a security phrase with family members, at least, that only you would know. And this is a phrase that if you have any doubt, what is the secret phrase? And if they can't tell you, then you better hang up. The technology, it's very realistic. And you talked a little bit about the anxiety and nervousness that someone might have when something like this is occurring. And it works two ways. One, you make emotional decisions because you are anxious that your loved one is actually in danger. But on the Gen AI side, when you take someone's voice, even if it's not 100% perfect, right? If you tell the prompt to make it more anxious and scared, then that heightened AI-driven voice, it's harder to really detect because most people are used to listening to people just conversational.
All right, so this new technology is making this worse. Can our engineers and smart people come up with systems now to maybe help us authenticate some of this?
Yeah, I know it sounds like a pretty doomy scenario, doomy outlook, and like any critical innovation or big innovation, there's going to be good users and bad users. I mean, you take something like nuclear fission, you've got either nuclear energy, you've got nuclear missiles. There are many people working right now to make sure that we don't end up in a post-truth world, that there are ways for the individual governments and everyone else to understand better when the things that they're seeing, hearing, consuming are actually authentic or that they're being manipulated in some way. And so there are a lot of people working on this problem. But sometimes these things take time, and defense always trails offense, unfortunately.
Wasim Khalid is CEO and co-founder of Blackbird AI. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you for having me.
Good idea on setting up a safe phrase with loved ones that AI won't know. We're also looking at a new front in regulating AI with news the Federal Trade Commission is investigating whether OpenAI, maker of ChatGPT, has violated consumer protection laws by harming people when it spreads false or defamatory information about them. That coverage is in the Marketplace Morning Report podcast feed if you miss it on the air. And AI clone, David, you going to say it? You know you want to. But first, let's do the numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is not available, Mr. AI, because the stock market's not open yet. This human knows to tell you that the Dow futures are up 0.5%, S&P futures are up 0.2%, NASDAQ futures pretty flat. Our executive producer is Kelly Silvera. Our digital producer is Jordan Manji. Our engineers are Nick Esposito, Jessen Dueller, and Brian Allison. I'm David Brancaccio with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
WNYC is supported by Maine Coast Semester, a semester away from home for high school juniors seeking a challenging academic journey, hands-on learning, and a closer connection to nature. Now enrolling for fall and spring terms. More at maincoastsemester.org.
Next, the BBC NewsHour on WNYC. New York State's congressional maps will be redrawn again. How this could help Democrats win back the House, that's today on the Brian Lair Show this morning at 10. 76 with some clouds and some sun out there. Late afternoon showers and thunderstorms likely in a high of 86. Right now for Orange and Putnam counties up there in the Hudson Valley, a flash flood warning extended until 11:15 today. Be careful out there. It's WNYC in New York.
This is WNYC FM HD and AM New York.
Welcome to NewsHour. It's live from the BBC World Service in London. I'm Tim Franks. The International Criminal Court opens an investigation into alleged war crimes in Western Sudan.
These people were Muslims who should have been buried in a graveyard with all the rituals. But unfortunately, the RSF, you could see desire for revenge in their eyes.
Also, as Hollywood actors strike over pay and artificial intelligence, we'll hear the fears of one cloned voiceover artist. India's cut-price, high-stakes moon mission has launched.
There was a very dense forest cover, but suddenly we saw this blaze of light just go up beyond the tree lining, and that's when we realized that it had happened.
The sweetener the World Health Organization says possibly causes cancer. The young French journalist whose short life was bookended by war. And can Spain's most macho street festival be made into a safe space for women? First, the news.
I'm Debbie Russ with the BBC News. Hello. President Bola Tinubu has declared a state of emergency as Nigeria battles a severe food crisis. One initiative involves using money saved from removing a fuel subsidy to provide grain and fertilizers for farmers. Richard Hamilton reports.
Africa's most populous country is grappling with a series of challenges in its agricultural sector, including the effects of climate change and deadly clashes between farmers and cattle herders. Banditry and an Islamist insurgency in the northeast are making things worse. Since he assumed office in May, President Tinubu has been keen to show that he's being proactive in tackling Nigeria's most pressing problems. No one will be left behind, the president tweeted, in our efforts to ensure affordable, plentiful food for every Nigerian.
The United Nations says almost 300 children are estimated to have died or disappeared this year while attempting to cross the Mediterranean from North Africa to Europe. The UN Children's Agency warned, however, that many shipwrecks leave no survivors or go unrecorded, making the true number impossible to verify. UNICEF is calling for more safe and legal routes for young people to claim asylum. One of Vietnam's largest online news outlets, Zing News, has suspended publication for 3 months after a government investigation. Viv Marsh reports.
Visitors to the Zing News website were greeted with a statement announcing the 3-month suspension. The outlet said it would focus on correcting its shortcomings. It appears Zing News has fallen foul of ever-tightening controls on the media, and news in particular, by Vietnam's communist authorities. It's licensed as a digital magazine, but also covers daily and breaking news. The website of the state-run newspaper, Doi Che, was given a similar ban 5 years ago after the government said it had posted false information.
Russia's lower house of parliament has unanimously passed legislation that bans gender reassignment surgery. It's the latest measure to target minority groups in Russia as part of a wider conservative nationalist drive against what are portrayed as Western values. Danny Eberhardt reports.
This legislation aims to restrict a slew of rights. It would prevent transgender people from adopting children or being their guardians, would annul marriages where one person has subsequently changed gender, and forbids people changing their gender on official documents. For the Speaker of the Duma, Vyacheslav Volodin, it protects Russia's citizens and children. Human rights groups disagree, seeing it as a further draconian attack on an already persecuted community. Transgender groups have expressed anger and distress, warning it could lead to a rise in suicide attempts and people seeking backstreet surgery or hormone treatments on the black market.
BBC News.
On WNYC, breaking news, Suffolk County Police have arrested someone in the long unsolved Gilgo Beach murders. This is according to multiple reports. Newsday cites an unnamed source who says the suspect is from the Massapequa area in Nassau County. News 12 Long Island first reported this story. 11 sets of human remains have been found in the area since 2010. More details as they become available. The New York City Council overwhelmingly voted to override Mayor Adams' veto of bills that would expand rental assistance to low-income New Yorkers at risk of eviction. Adams argues the bills are too costly, while supporters of the measure say the city needs to act urgently to stem homelessness in the midst of an affordable housing crisis. Brooklyn Council member Charles Barron criticized the mayor for vetoing the bills.
As you said, Mayor, you are guided by God in dealing with policy. Well, the Bible says you should be concerned about the least of these.
Adams touted his administration's recent efforts in expanding housing vouchers to those in homeless shelters. The mayor says he's reviewing his options, which could include challenging the new laws in court. A flash flood warning has been extended for Orange and Putnam counties after heavy rainfall as the Hudson Valley recovers from last weekend's devastating flood. That warning now up to 11:15 this morning. The warning also includes parts of New Jersey. The storms could lash the area with an inch or two of rain over the course of just an hour. Orange County Executive in New York, Steve Newhouse.
The storms add to just the chaos that we have out there, which is really what you have after a storm. The difficult stage was Sunday when it was, came out of left field.
Newhouse says more than 70,000 people remain without power in Orange County, northwest of the city, and that number could increase as more storms pound the area. A flood advisory for New York City until 10:15 this morning. 76 now with a mix of sun and clouds. Late afternoon showers and thunderstorms likely today.
Hello and welcome to NewsHour. It's live from the BBC World Service studios in central London. I'm Tim Franks. The International Criminal Court has opened a new investigation into alleged war crimes in the Darfur region of Sudan. Ethnic violence has surged there as part of the conflict between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary RSF. The court's chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, said that the reports included attacks on civilians, mass rapes, and the burning of homes and markets. He said the investigation would be conducted under an existing mandate for Darfur dating back to 2005. That probe led to genocide charges against Sudan's former president, Omar al-Bashir. Our Africa correspondent Mercy Juma has been to neighbouring Chad, where she spoke with refugees who say they've seen for themselves the evidence of atrocities.
Carrying what little they have, these families have just crossed the border from Sudan to Chad. They are joining over 170,000 refugees who are living in camps along the frontier after fleeing ethnic fighting that has erupted in Darfur. Among them, a man too scared to reveal his identity, who has evidence of one of the most shocking incidents of the conflict. Pictures taken on his phone before he fled Darfur show dead bodies scattered in streets. Many appear to be civilians or have been burned. Aid agency facilities wrecked, and perhaps most disturbingly, bodies dumped from a lorry into a mass grave. He says he was part of a group that removed corpses after fighting so the Rapid Support Forces seized control of parts of the city of El Geneina.
We removed the bodies of the dead who were killed by the RSF or the Arab militias backed by the RSF. We went towards the forest graveyard to bury the bodies, but the RSF refused to bury the bodies there. Under the orders of the RSF, the driver of the truck dumped the bodies in the pit.
He says the decision to dump the bodies in a mass grave was a deliberate act of disrespect.
These people were Muslims who should have been buried in a graveyard with all the rituals, but unfortunately the RSF, you could see desire for revenge in their eyes.
In April, fighting erupted in Sudan as a power struggle within the country's military leadership pitted the army against the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. RSF has its origins in the Arab militia that brutally suppressed a rebellion by black African groups in 2003, resulting in accusations of ethnic cleansing and genocide. The recent fighting has allowed the conflict in Darfur to reignite. The violence doesn't appear to be random.
My name is Mujib Ar-Rahman Muhammad Yaqub Rizik. I am the leader of Masalit
tribe.
Members of the black African groups say Arab groups have systematically attacked them.
This is a genocide because all the Masalit leader has been target. The lawyers, teachers, doctors.
Members of black African communities say attacks like these against both community leaders and ordinary people are why tens of thousands of people have fled the fighting.
Refugee camps in Chad are just a symptom of the violence that is happening across the border in Darfur, Sudan. We have had stories of targeted killings and robberies, official buildings being burnt down and looted, and this is just the latest episode of ethnically targeted violence in a long-running crisis that has seen years of death and destruction.
Mercy Juma on the stories that she's been gleaning in Chad about the terrors inflicted over the border in Western Sudan. So what can we say for certain about the scale of the atrocities and the hard evidence that might be used should the prosecutor at the ICC believe there's enough of a case to bring charges? Among those carrying out their own investigations is Caitlin Howarth. She's director of the Conflict Observatory at Yale University's Humanitarian Research Lab. Caitlin, thanks for joining us on NewsHour. Tell me what you and your team have been documenting.
Thank you for having me. Our team has documented the widespread and systematic targeting and destruction of at least 25 communities, which has forcibly displaced almost 670,000 civilians so far.
That is an enormous number. I mean, presumably this is stuff that you've been able to see, through satellite data principally?
Yes, we utilize satellite imagery of a variety of bands, as well as all of the open source material that we can possibly gather, including anything that's reported from credible outlets like yourselves who gather it from such courageous civilians.
And when you're talking about destruction of these communities and more than 500,000 people have been affected, I mean, are we talking about, I mean, we've heard about the accounts of violence in Mercy Juma's report. Obviously people are fleeing as well, but are you talking about the destruction of communities in such a way that basically they're being sort of forced off the land?
They're forced off the land, and things are destroyed in such a manner that makes it impossible for any civilian to survive. This is what we say is the destruction of civilian infrastructure necessary for survival. That's the razing, the burning down, the wanton destruction of civilian homes and dwellings, schools, hospitals, food markets, all of the infrastructure needed for communication, water and electricity, and anything that constitutes a humanitarian facility. This is throughout Darfur. There have been widespread reports of extrajudicial detentions and killings, including the alleged targeted killing of men and boys. And then that's before we even start on the sexual and gender-based violence, these mass rapes, and other cases alleged against women and girls. This is by far some of the most widespread and, importantly, most rapid violence that we have seen in this region, all of it taking place in a matter of only 10 weeks.
The violence that we've been talking about in Sudan, particularly in Khartoum and the other major cities, has been between the RSF and the Sudanese army. The RSF is, we often say it came out of the Arab Janjaweed militia that became notorious during the appalling events in Darfur pretty much 20 years ago. From what you're able to understand, is it a similar pattern of violence in terms of this is ethnic? I don't know if it's religious. I mean, the fact that this is Arab militia against black tribespeople, in particular the Masalit.
They are, yes, so they are non-Arab, but they are also Muslim. So these are peoples who should be buried with full Muslim religious rites and rituals. They are being denied those rites and rituals by people who fully understand the impact that has. So without really taking this into some of the religious dimensions, what this really is about the RSF and their aligned forces really pushing through and taking over control of the territory and making it impossible for these people to come back. and making certain that they have